Now, it's time to say a very good afternoon to Allison Pearson, a woman that I've admired from afar for very long, but I don't think she's ever actually been on the show. Alison, very good afternoon to you.
Thrilled to be in the People's Republic, Mike.
It's really far too long since we should have had you on months ago, years ago probably, but finally we've managed to do it. I was meant to be joining you for that great Brexit supporting celebratory dinner, and it was the one day that I was sick last year, and I couldn't. I just knew that it wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be a good idea for me to show up, so I apologise for that. But thank goodness you have seen that this is such a great story, because I despair sometimes about the media landscape that we live in now, where journalists seem to have forgotten how to be journalists, and they sort of chase around after the same rat, trying to catch it and failing miserably. This is a massive story, this GP's thing, isn't it?
It's absolutely huge. I mean, as a journalist, Mike, you write something and then you light the blue touch paper and you stand well back. So I've had several thousand emails from Telegraph readers, also the Planet Normal podcast, which I do with Liam Halligan. And we've had, just scores of responses from listeners and readers. And they're all saying, I can't get into my GP for love nor money. We've also focused on one particular case, a guy called Nick Stokes, who ironically used to be the chair of an NHS trust himself. His wife, Joy, became ill last year and had very, very bad pain in her leg and hip. It was the usual story, fill in the e-consult form, ring up the GP at 8 a.m, not get seen. The receptionist, who's now become the new doctor, Mike, you'll be interested to know that the receptionist is God, said it wasn't an emergency. Anyway, to cut a very long story short, Joy was finally seen by a GP who was shocked by her appearance, and her husband Nick said, well, you should have seen her before, shouldn't you? Finally went and had a scan and had really terminal cancer by that point. So Joy died about 3 weeks ago, and I've really been campaigning based on that really, really shocking story. And the oncology department said if she had come in earlier, she'd be alive today, Mike.
It's awful, isn't it? It doesn't bear thinking about. And if you're her husband or any member of her family, you must be thinking, what on earth's gone wrong with this country? Because, here we have Dua Lipa standing up at the Brit Awards telling everyone to, give more money to the nurses and to, just clap for the heroes of the NHS. And there's an awful lot of the NHS which is great, but there's an awful lot of it that isn't great. And the thing I've found amazing is that I can't discover who's in charge of GPs in this country. There doesn't seem to be anyone.
No, it's quite hard to get to the bottom of. We know they've been given an instruction to move towards telemedicine. I mean, I don't even think telemedicine should be a thing.
No.
That means digital triage. That means if you can get through, which is, congratulations, if you can actually get through to the surgery. And then somebody then who picks up the phone will decide, if you have the privilege of speaking to a doctor who on some good surgeries, they'll ring you back that same day. I had an email from a reader this morning saying they've been told the doctor will ring them back in 9 days' time. Will they still be alive? Who knows?
Right.
And they won't specify a time. And most of us work, Mike, don't we? So
well, that's it. And I mean, I put out a tweet above one of our interviews a couple of weeks ago, just saying the doctor won't see you now, because that's kind of where we are, isn't it? Because this idea of the e-consult system, which clearly doesn't seem to work terribly well, and certainly doesn't work for anyone who's not particularly computer savvy. Some of the elderly patients that need the doctor more than anyone, they don't know how to do that, do they?
Well, I've had, actually, they're sort of black comedy, really. Elderly lady wrote to me and she said that she had some moles on her back, right. And the receptionist said to send a photograph of the moles on her back. And the lady said, I live on my own. I can't take a photograph. And she said, take a selfie in the mirror. This is to an 84-year-old lady. But I think the broader concern for me is not only are lots of GP surgeries not back to normal yet, the plan is for them to never get back to normal. We've had Matt Hancock saying, this is great, we're all going to be digital. There's no need for anyone to see their GPs. Anyone who does need to see the GP will be allowed to. But what many doctors who've written to me have said is, as you'll know, Mike, when you go in for an appointment, it's not necessarily the first thing you say that's wrong with you. Sometimes it's going to be the third thing that gives them the idea. So how is this triage system supposed to, tell people what's seriously wrong with them? And I think it's just dreadful. I don't think the people in this country voted to not have access to their GPs. It's not happening in other countries. I just think it's a total scandal.
Yes. I mean, I spoke to a GP who said, some doctors are nervous of going into the GP surgery because they're frightened of getting COVID. And I'm like, well, maybe they're in the wrong job. I mean, if you're a doctor and you're frightened of getting a disease for which you can be vaccinated against, then really maybe you should rethink what you're doing. And also, because a listener actually sent me this, I think it originally was published in the Telegraph, but it's Ivy Grove Surgery's letter to its patients. I don't know if you saw that, but it includes a patient page in which they basically say that they have a sort of a contract of agreement with their patients, which makes it a two-way process. So they're basically asking patients not to bother them with anything that might be a bit trivial, and instead to wait until they're really ill before they bother to get in touch. And you're kind of going, what sort of madness is this? It's a 16-page letter that they sent to every single patient of theirs to basically say, back off, stop bothering us, leave us alone, we're having trouble with the phone system.
There's extraordinary arrogance, I find, some of these GPs, and you think, sorry, you're a doctor. There was one email from a GP which basically said, we're highly skilled professionals, you wouldn't be expecting to see a lawyer on the same day. You think, you're not a lawyer, you're a bloody doctor.
Yeah. Also, if you pay the lawyers enough, they'll come straight round. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing, Mike, is a lot of Telegraph readers are saying to me they're dipping into their savings to go private, and lo and behold, if you can suddenly conjure up 250 quid, you're straight in.
Yes.
So that doesn't suggest those doctors are at risk. And the other thing about this thing about GPs saying, oh, it's not safe, I had a brilliant email from one pharmacist, and he said he's next to the GP surgery, and they were sending patients into him to take blood and to do blood pressure because they said it wasn't COVID safe for them to have it here. And he said, I'm a pharmacist. Am I a lowly person who isn't at any risk? He said, we've kept going throughout. So you've got physios working, you've got dentists working, you've got pharmacists working, you've got district nurses working, and they can't get in touch with GPs for love nor money.
No.
So it's what is happening. I mean, as you said at the top, it's true that lots of GPs are doing their best. I've had emails from GPs saying they're trying to persuade their practice colleagues to see more people face to face, but the government impetus seems to be, let's keep it digital. This is what we want. We don't want people going in, but people are desperate to go in, and people are dying, Mike, or discovering they've got terminal cancer. The Macmillan Cancer Charity says that there are 50,000 people in the UK who are wandering around with undiagnosed cancers because they haven't been seen. Now that could very soon, the number of cases that have been caused by deaths that have been caused by lockdown, not by COVID, I think will outstrip the number of COVID deaths.
I think there is absolutely no doubt about that. But also you point out that some of these doctors who are too frightened to see anybody for the purposes of consultation are not too frightened to see them if they're getting 12 quid per head every time they put a jab in their arm. And so,
I heard today, because I said that I thought they were getting 12 quid per vaccination, and somebody said today that it's much, much higher than that. So, I mean, one listener said to me, Planet Normal listener said to me that the GP said he couldn't see her, and the next day she was ahead of him in the supermarket checkout, and he said, oh, you're not too frightened to come to the supermarket then.
Yeah.
So I think there's mounting frustration and despair. People have been very, very patient, and they're, spending hours on the phone trying to get through, and it's not acceptable.
Yeah, and also, I mean, my kids are not very young anymore, but you remember a time when you've got young children and you're constantly in and out of the GPs because one of them's got something. It must be a nightmare if you've got young children right now, because, it's tough enough, as you say, taking time off work to make sure you can get an appointment. But if you can't even get one, you're going to be sitting there wondering what on earth to do. But the other thing is that, I'm told that basically GPs are paid per head of their surgery numbers, right? So they don't actually get paid for doing anything in particular. So if they do nothing, they simply collect the money because of the number of people they've got registered.
Yes, that's right. And also what's happening, they have been being paid throughout. All the people who need to earn a living, of course, they've actually had to stay open.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing is people in despair are going to A&E, and the doctors in the hospitals are absolutely spitting at the GPs because they're saying you're not doing your damn job. and all the people are, of course, turning up at casualty. Well, why wouldn't you? As you said, if you've got a sick baby, you can't just, wait on a phone to maybe get to talk to the GP that afternoon. So there are more and more barriers to actually what most of us understand by medicine, which is, a healing touch, people looking you in the eye, all the signs that a doctor can tell if you're not, how's your skin color, how are you walking, all those things. And I just think it's, as I said, it's a move towards something that seems to be from the highest levels. But what we've seen this last week is that the Royal College of GPs has, one of the people there has spoken out and said there are going to be unintended consequences of not allowing patients to see GPs. That's a polite way of saying a lot of people are dying or discovering they've got terminal cancer or heart problems because they haven't been able to see the doctor. So I think it'll be interesting to see whether the official GP body will start pushing back now against what seems to be a government policy.
Well, they really should, because it's also been suggested to me by some doctors that there's a sort of recruitment crisis in the world of GPs, because many of them have been able to take early retirement. Many of them haven't liked the way that the GP's business has been going in terms of having to run a sort of business which they didn't really buy into in the first place. So, I mean, that may well be the case. But if that is the case, then why is there not a recruitment drive going on?
Well, there certainly does seem to be a shortage. I think there are at least 1,000 down. I think we were promised 5,000 more GPs. They haven't turned up. One of the big problems, I think, is that they can pick and choose their working hours. You have practices where many of the GPs are only working 3 days a week. Right. Nice work if you can get it. So I think when we were kids, you'd have a family doctor, wouldn't you, who you'd go and see. And
they used to come and see us sometimes.
Come and see, I mean, pay house calls and be on night duty. Under the Tony Blair government, the GPs were apparently given a settlement so generous that their union representatives simply couldn't believe that the government had been so stupid as to give them such a generous thing. They didn't have to do out of hours. They didn't have to do house calls. So now we've got a case where you're very unlikely to go to the surgery and ever see the same doctor.
Right.
And the problem with that, of course, is that, so I had an email this morning from a reader who said that her husband's very sadly finally been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And she said he hadn't seen the same GP or even talked to the same GP over the last few months. So no one's doing any joined up, diagnosis, basically.
No, exactly right. And even if you do, I mean, I've been very fortunate with my health. I've only, I think, been to my local doctor in London twice, maybe in 10 years, neither for anything particularly, terrible. And it's just a massive operation now. They've got something like 10 doctors. They've got a huge car park. They've got a waiting room that's got about 50 chairs in it. And I mean, you wouldn't even expect to see the same person twice. I don't even think the receptionist was the same when I went there. And it's so huge that it's kind of too cumbersome, really, to be a family doctor.
I think also that's right. I mean, there are some GPs who've been really good. They've put up marquees in the staff car park. They've continued to see people throughout. They show that it's possible to be done. I suppose what really gets to me is throughout the pandemic, we've had, supermarket workers, delivery people, retail people, all, running a small risk. We all think you and I think it's a small risk, Mike, but nevertheless running a small risk. And you've got these very entitled middle-class GPs thinking, oh no, that's not for us. And you think, sorry, why are you so special? Why are you so entitled? Your duty is to see sick people. And there are lots of veteran GPs who have said to me they're disgusted with their colleagues because they worked through there was a pandemic in 68, 69. There's been SARS, there's been major flu epidemics. They put the ill people, they put the infected people in one hospital, and then they just got on with the job. So I think we're seeing this lot dragging their heels. They should be open now. I mean, there's like, how many deaths, COVID deaths are there? It's far more urgent to see people with other diseases now, much more urgent.
Absolutely right. And also there's far more areas of Britain now with zero COVID than there are areas with any infections whatsoever. So there's not even any justification for them being frightened. How about this, right? I've got this from Stephen, who's tweeted us. Mike, I've been waiting to speak to my GP for 3 days, finally booked an appointment. He complained the line was bad. I suggested he reopens the surgery for face-to-face appointments, and he hung up. I mean, it's amazing.
One lady said to me that she'd rung in at her appointed hour, and the nurse said, the receptionist said, "Oh, the doctor's ill. He's not even here." But this has been recorded as a good call. You know, this has been marked down as a successful call. And she said, "But I haven't been allowed to speak to the doctor." So yeah, so there's a lot of madness going on. I think frustration is building. We didn't vote for this, did we, Mike?
We certainly did not.
We did not vote for this. If the government had put on it as one of its manifesto promises, we're going to stop you seeing your GP unless it's under unusual circumstances, how many people would have voted for that?
Well, exactly. And I've got a tweet here from somebody called Ben Molyneux, who calls himself the Sessional GP Committee Chair at the BMA, Portfolio GP. He's tweeted out today, right? Just today, GPs deserve a decent pay rise from this government after giving their all for COVID this year. Not another insulting below inflation pay award. Write to your MP and tell them the doctor deserves better. I don't think so, Ben.
No. I mean, it's beyond belief. Isn't it the case, Mike, that we've seen really great and heroic work from many doctors and nurses and auxiliary staff in the front line, and then we've seen people basically, you know, not getting off their arses, and a lot of GPs fall, I'm afraid, into that latter category. The idea that they need a pay rise, we need money back, we need a refund for the services they haven't been providing. And in fact, so many, as I said, so many Planet Normal listeners have been saying they've been dipping into savings to go private. Most people can't afford to go private. So it's become a two-tier system. We're always told, Mike, in this country that if we move to a sensible system like they have in Australia or Germany or France, which is part insurance, part state, oh no, that would be, you know, sacrilege for our NHS. No, that might actually mean that people get a proper service. So we can't have a grown-up conversation about the NHS in this country because it's a religion, it's not a health service. And if you say anything against it, then you're evil. But actually there are parts of it that don't work very well, and we can see that many GP surgeries are allowing patients to die because they won't see them, and that's not a good enough service. And I think we have to have a, you know, rational discussion which says that we have some excellent staff, brilliant doctors and nurses, but the management of the health service is absolutely bloody lamentable. And it's a monolithic thing. It's not responsive. As you said, who's given this instruction that we stay with telemedicine? Who's done that? You know?
Yeah.
And
it makes absolutely no sense. And talking, let's leave that just for 1 second to the side, because talking of things that don't work very well, you've also referred to the Labour Party this morning in your column. They despise Northerners. They just, I mean, I think poor old Keir Starmer, he loves North Londoners, but he's not very good with anybody north of Edgware, is he?
No, exactly. Anyone north of Camden is yeah, I mean, it wasn't interesting with Hartlepool. I thought that for 2 weeks prior to the elections last Thursday, we basically had the BBC, all the other news channels banging on about Boris's wallpaper. Was this the end of Boris? It was an absolute scandal. Did it have any impact on the elections? On the contrary, nobody gives a stuff, Mike, do they, about the wallpaper?
No.
And it, you know, no apology from the BBC for sort of spending 2 weeks on stuff that people find completely trivial. Yeah, I think that look at the people in Hartlepool. I think Labour loves a victim. That's all they really care about. You know, it's good that people care about people who are struggling, but this obsession with victimhood. And I thought the people up north, they don't want to be seen as charity cases.
No.
You know, they good life. They want a house. They want lovely holidays. They want to go out for a few drinks. People want to enjoy themselves. And the Labour message, I mean, Starmer looks just like he's sat on a bloody pincushion, don't you think?
He's so dull. He's unremittingly dull. It's almost like it's worse than dull, because he's sort of smothering you with his dullness.
Yes, and now look at him now today. It's all, let's tweet about, Israel. Isn't Israel horrible? But you're thinking, people have got stuff in this country that they're more worried about than Israel.
Right.
They're more interested in the NatWest Bank than they are in the West Bank. So I think it's that they're international socialists, really, is what they are.
Yeah.
And they increasingly have nothing to say to normal working people. And I agree with you. I mean, do you think the Labour Party is relevant, and do you think it can
I think it's actually finished. I can't see them ever getting back into government. I don't see the point of them at all. And the only thing they can now do, really, is to continually appoint new mayors for places like, I don't know, maybe the next mayor should be Luton and Dunstable, and they can get a Labour mayor in there and they can mess about with the police commission. And I mean, but as far as national policies go, they haven't got any.
No, and I think that if you look at the majorities, incredibly slim. I mean, someone like Ed Miliband is in Doncaster North. I think he's got about 2,300 majority. Yvette Cooper is over in Normanton and Castleford. Tiny majorities. Yeah. I mean, if Boris called a snap election, how many of them would fall like skittles?
Yes. Well, they're bound to lose Batley, I think, aren't they?
I don't know if they'll lose Batley, because it's a big Muslim town, and there's there's a big kind of cozy deal, I think, with the Labour Party. I think that might be close, but there are certainly other constituencies. But I think, coming back to our GP theme, Mike, if we had a proper opposition in this country, they'd have been raising stuff like people can't see a doctor, which is of general interest. As we know, you get thousands and thousands of reactions to it, but instead of the opposition raising it, you and I have to raise it. We are
well, I think that's right. We are basically the opposition, and I get into terrible trouble with the listeners to Talk Radio. Go, why are you attacking Boris? I'm like, because nobody else is doing it. Somebody has to do it.
Well, somebody, and I voted for Boris, and it's not I see myself attacking him, but any government has to be kept honest by good opposition. But you've got Starmer, who basically stood there saying, yes, I agree with you, I just want more of that, lockdown, harder, faster, whatever. Why isn't Labour daren't attack the NHS, so it won't stand up for constituents who are dying because they can't see their doctor? I mean, it's anyway, catch 22.
It is, absolutely. But it's great to talk to you, Alison. Thank you. We must do this more often. Allison Pearson, very much of a sensible individual. Daily Telegraph columnist, author and presenter of the Planet Normal podcast as well. Go and have a listen to that while you're at it.